Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN. Today, we are sitting down with another recent row winner from the epic, I guess it would be the epic bracket of the Strife Conference, essentially, but in that Season of Strife Conference here as another mainstay match where we are having a conversation with the FA team. And here with me as their row lead, who's going to be able to break down a lot of how their play has been going up until this point. Recent match against BTR, potential upcoming match as well against GG. We have Lev.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for having me on, BN.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for making some time for us. So, Mr. Lewowski, there is again a number of things that I obviously want to talk about. First and foremost, I mean, the Epic Conference really hasn't obviously I know been getting as much love as the Legendary one, which again maybe is just is what it is, right? With how they did the kind of what I almost consider as like an upper and a lower bracket to the Strive Conference essentially. But your guys' match again, you had a pretty convincing victory over BTR. You got GG coming up next, and I'm curious because for me, I love being able to sit down and have conversations with people about row. One, because I feel like I get to learn a lot from it, but also secondly, it just seems like a really good opportunity to talk to different teams at especially if they're at kind of different tier thresholds, depending on not only the conference they're in, but where their power is comparatively to others that we might talk to and have conversations with. So, if you can walk me through FAs, because you guys are 7-1 right now, going into the second round for your playoffs. What has been the what's been the I guess the view on Row League for you guys once it was announced, and how serious were you taking it before that?
Yeah, oddly enough, I think we've gotten more. I wish we were a little bit more serious from the get-go, but we've become a lot more serious now, especially in the Epic bracket. Because I think looking back, the legendary bracket, I think, there's a lot of strategy involved, but I think if both teams they're both aware of, the current meta game strategies. I mean, the cat's out of the bag as far as like the tree roots and all that stuff right now, but let's say both
Yeah.
teams are aware of, the objectives and how to get to them as quickly as possible. I think it comes down to just a wallet difference. I know some people aren't probably going to like that, but the way the row meta game is set up is you essentially need really good cavs, really good infantry. And I think we knew, like, when we first registered for Row League, that we could get out of like the group phases and stuff, because it was essentially one good alliance and they threw in just a bunch of random other alliances who had applied, and it was basically a free 3 wins. So we didn't take it all too seriously. The way we saw it was like, oh, hey guys, look, 3 weeks of rewards that are free. And then we went into the knockout rounds. Unfortunately, we had one of the NTS teams, and they were really coordinated. We still went in there, put up a good fight, but at the time we didn't have like an entry order or anything like that. And then once we realized, we were kind of getting put into this epic bracket, we were like, you know what, we're really on par as far as our spend level and account development as some of these other teams. I think we have a really good shot of winning this. So that's when we actually really dialed in, and we adjusted a lot of our strategies, and we looked at some of what like the other teams were doing. And I also have to give a really big shout out to Ika from Snicks. They actually joined our alliance very recently, but I had a really good sit down with him. We did some testing, and he was one of the people who had mentioned some of the stuff that the tree roots was actually capable of. So we tested it out, and we got a really solid strategy on board. We got an entry order on board, and then we had a couple of practice matches before the actual row with the team to get kind of warmed up to face BTR. And one of the biggest things we also did was we looked at how they play and analyzed how they act. We looked at their loss and we essentially tried to replicate that. And oddly enough, their only other loss was again to Snicks. So we kind of had like this insider take as
Okay.
we, were practicing and preparing preparing for them. So yeah, that's kind of how we essentially viewed the row and what we're kind of doing going forward, I would say.
Okay. Okay. No, very nice. And I noticed the tree roots thing is something, and again, I know obviously Abda talked about it, but this is something that I mean I have to imagine maybe others were aware of. So you're stating from your conversation with Ika, this was something you guys were aware of at that time prior to playoffs or maybe going into playoffs.
It was literally the same week that MFD pulled it off. He was like, "Hey, by the way, have you seen the strat?" And I was like, "No, because we were running T2 calves with Springbird Feather
Yeah.
to try to beat people there." And he was saying, "No, no, you actually have to use this. Check it out. If you stand here and you do such and such, it'll actually get you there like 10, 15 seconds ahead of time." And at the end of the day, man, what it comes down to is if you get I'm sure you're aware, but if you get the halls that are kind of in between like the halfway point to both
Yeah.
alliances on both the left and right side, if you can get those before the enemy and you put like a Garwood Kuma on there, you can basically win the match. Like that,
Mm.
that's what it comes down to. So that was kind of our game plan was get these, hold them the entire time, and then we'll be able to win. And then the other thing was just deny them of life stones and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So and again, it's interesting because I'm seeing this as well where you guys kind of and I remember because Abda was, pretty adamant about this in our conversation about kind of the value of the outposts.
Hmm.
And I noticed because I'm playing your guys' match right now, and we're about 8 minutes in, and I saw that you guys basically it feels like at least for these first 8 minutes or so, maybe this will be shown throughout the match. You guys very much had a focus on the outposts. You guys were able to cap BTR's two outposts pretty much initially. It looks like you guys had two dedicated peeps that were going over there to grab those along with your own that you still held up until this point. Is do you have a similar feeling and belief when it comes to the value of outposts and maybe some teams might be undervaluing them?
I mean, absolutely. Like if you think about it, if you hold four of the outposts in the game, it's slightly less than having one of the halls, and that adds up over the course of the game. On top of the fact that I don't think people realize that. I mean, I know most competitive teams do, but there's like a first capture bonus to a lot of this stuff too, right? So it's like all those little things that you can do add up. And another thing that we also try to do is sometimes will leave like an infantry in each one of them, just because you can teleport to them when the fade rakes come up. That's another really big thing. Like if you have a legion that you can bounce to back and forth for when those fade rakes are up and you have staffs available, and you can kill it or you can block the other team from getting to it.
Oh,
It's just really good value.
yeah. And I saw, and again, this is, a lot of these things are a little newer for me, but it looks like even from just having the outpost, you get the +3 Legion field of view. I imagine if those are stacking at that point and you cap theirs, that's +6 right off the bat. I mean, that obviously has to play just from having kind of a fog of war extended advantage out on the field with all your troops. I mean, that has to obviously play, I imagine, um, some added benefit throughout the match if you're able to have that. Now, I don't know if that's just passively applied to every Legion out on the field. I guess you'll have to correct me on that if that is how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like every little bit helps, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going for. The way I told my team was, hey, this match is going to be a lot closer than you think. We need to really min max and you know get the best value out of our points, and get the best value out of what we can and can't do or can and can't see on the field. And all of these little things are going to add up. And if you guys can just maintain that for an hour, I promise you will win. Because, I don't know if you were aware, but they were like a 10 or 11 to 1 betting favorite. And, I was talking to Yami about it and you about it the other day. I think they just had like a lot of the name recognition and basically everybody counted us out.
Yeah.
So that's.
No, I mean it. I think it very much feels that way with some of the bigger names or maybe people that have got some content play here and there, or if they've had maybe been in bigger KVK brackets, and any number of those things I'm sure will play a factor. But I think if anything, the one thing that I think is a benefit, from at least what MFD was able to pull off, is it feels like there's now a little bit more emphasis on the opportunities for those either upsets or those potential matchups to have a little bit more eyes on them, right? That might not necessarily be as guaranteed as maybe the betting odds might be playing into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I mean, they pulled off some stuff that I didn't even, think of. So I actually think it's really great that maybe some of these teams that aren't as well known are actually, taking the time to come up with some of these new strategies. And a lot of these bigger teams, I think, are catching on and very likely they're going to implement something different. I'm very excited to see what this next week holds
Yeah.
after some of these upsets last week.
No, absolutely. So walk me through some of your guys' prep going into the BTR match, and if it differed at all between your preliminary or division matchup prep.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, I spoke to Ika, and he was from Snicks, and they were the one team that BTR had actually lost to. And I said, hey, we're facing them this next week. This is kind of what I have to work with. And we sat down and we reviewed their gameplay against them and kind of what they did to win. And he was like, look, you have essentially a lot of the same characteristics and qualities that our team did. If you just utilize these people properly, you guys have a really good shot of winning. And he said, I don't think they're going to see what you guys are going to do coming, because not a lot of people, even I if you look at our match, they didn't know about the tree roots, right? Like, we used it. That was again, that was probably the biggest factor in us securing the win, was we were able to get to the buildings and hold them down. So we practiced that with our team. We reviewed the gameplay of how they lost before, and we just tried to replicate that, right? So one of the things we noticed was they commit really, really hard to getting the life stone. So I said, my team, I don't have as many cav and infantry mains as some of these other teams. What do we have? We have, a lot of people who have a ton of celestials. So I don't know if you look at our match, but around the time the first lifestone comes, one of the things we did was incorporate one of those strengths that we had. And I said, hey guys, at the end of the day, our game plan is going to be to win by building control and just denying them the lifestone. I said, even if they get all 3 lifestones, if we do this right like this, we can definitely win. So that's essentially what we ended up prepping for. Is we made what we called like a denial squad. We were just screaming, deny, 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 just, stop them from getting the lifestone cap early, just make them commit a lot of troops there. And then, what we'll do is we'll essentially just secure as many of their buildings as possible. And by the time they do get the lifestone back, they might not have a building to take it to, or it'll just time out. So that was kind of our strategy and game plan going forward. I spoke to the team about it. We practiced it, and then it came time to execute it. You can tell, you can see there was a few blunders. Like, we lost one of our early hauls pretty early on in the match, or one of our close hauls early on in the match, I should say, but we were able to retake it. And then again, when the lifestone kind of came up, we were able to put a lot of pressure on those outer buildings and prevent them from picking it up, which essentially ensured that we would, get the lead as far as building points, and then, just work our way off of that for the remainder of the match.
Yeah. No, man, absolutely. And it's funny because right when you were talking about that, we're at around the 15-minute mark, and we were able just to watch the Sapphire Drake fight at the BTR outposts that you guys pretty much had committed to at that point, and then you were able to kind of recap them, at least for a brief period, and then right around this looks like 15.5 minute mark, they were able to get them back. But then also at the same time, you mentioning about being able to kind of take their opening haul of power there, and it looks like you guys might end up getting it back at this point here, at least based on how the rally's going. So, I mean, how important is because again, and I was talking about this with Abda, is that to me it feels like there is a huge emphasis, or at least a massive opportunity for gameplay review and VOD review, and how that at times can really make such a massive difference on the map. And I'm someone who very much likes analyzing, I like assessing, I like reviewing, I like looking for tendencies, gaps and opportunities. What level of, because again, I know you guys said you guys watched some VODs on there. Was it you? Did you guys have a team of people? Did you guys watch previous matches from BTR? Was it just their most recent match? Maybe, regardless of how much detail you might want to go into, how much emphasis was there put on um, kind of VOD review going into the BTR match? How much was really consumed, and kind of what was the game plan when it came to what you guys were trying to identify?
Yeah, no, definitely. Great question. What we did was, like I said, we looked at their loss, right? We were like, how did they lose to this one specific team? Like, what was it that this one team did that they just couldn't beat them? And I said, okay, I looked at it and I said, we have the same capabilities on our side to just replicate this. And, in order to do that, we basically need to hold down Hall of Water and Hall of Blessings on the right and left side. If we can do that, for the entirety of the match, we will win. And I also put a big emphasis on these outposts, and I sat down with my guys. I said, hey, look, if you guys take some time and watch this video, because me and Ika did it ourselves for about maybe hour or two, and we were reviewing some of their VODs. A lot of the stuff that you see, unfortunately, isn't that great because it's typically a blowout. One side just completely stomps the other side. I think it's going to be a lot more valuable now that we're in the knockout rounds and you're facing teams of equal quality. But they did have that one particular match where they lost, and we were able to kind of identify what they do or how much they commit to the lifestone, or how quickly do they go for the fade drakes when they spawn, or can we maybe can we get there like 30 seconds early and block the ramp so that we're the only ones who get access to it. It was just looking at those minute little details and kind of understanding the team that you're going up against. And it's like you said, you kind of look at their tendencies, like what do they like to do and when, and if we can, and what's the best counter strategy to that. So that's kind of, what we did. As far as, I don't think we went into as much depth and detail as say MFD did. I know they spent probably like, over 20 plus hours reviewing VODs. I don't know what it was that Abda said, but for us, it was pretty simple. It's like, hey, these guys have something out there that works. They've lost to this one particular team. We just got to replicate that and we can get a W too.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, given who MFD was going up against, it was probably um, comparatively appropriate for the amount of time that they were investing into their VOD review, uh, which is understandable. So, you guys, you guys go in, you identify some opportunities that you want to try and take advantage of, and you want to try and um, utilize during your match against BTR.
Mm-hmm.
How well would you say what were so post match concludes, or better yet, during the match? Do
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like during the match I guess maybe the real time reactions from you and maybe anyone else that were more kind of on the leadership side, did it feel like during the match, maybe kind of your first half, things were going well, things were being executed, and then maybe the second half, it was just kind of more of like, okay, now we're like, honing in, running away. Were there any kind of mid game adaptions that you guys did, or maybe you felt like you had to do, or things you were testing to say, you know what, let's try this, or or I guess anything that you felt might have needed to happen from any assessments, or was it more of like, you know what, no, we didn't really feel like we were even in any kind of a trouble where we had to. But was there any, I guess, was there any opportunity you felt like where maybe some kind of a mid-game adaptation needed to happen, and if so, right, how did the team take it, or if there was any kind of adjustments that needed to be made?
Yes, as far as the mid game, I don't think so. I think as soon as I'm telling you, after the first Lifestone, I think we realized what we were doing was working. The only really big blunder I would say is when we lost the Hall of Nature super early and they
Yep.
were able to get the occupation points, but we were able to retake that fairly quickly and hold it down for the remainder of the game. Once we realized that, hey, they actually can't take these left and right halls from us. All we have to do is basically just, deny them from getting the lifestone points as much as we can. And if we, I think once the team realized the strategy that I had been preaching to them early on was working, they were kind of dialed in and they knew what they had to do. People were, and I got to really commend these guys. Like nobody was playing like, greedy. Everybody was just going in, reinforcing buildings, doing what they needed to do, and everybody was just really, really dialed in. Once they kind of saw the strat coming into motion and seeing that we were winning, especially like when we got the first, I think we got the first two Drakes too. I think that's when people were like, "Yeah, we can definitely win this. We just got to keep this up for another 30 minutes."
Yeah, no, absolutely. So match concludes. You guys win by basically 2.5 points at this time, or 2.5 point ratio. What what did you really like that the team did well? And then what do you feel were maybe some opportunities or some areas of improvement that you felt after the match? And I guess even before that, when the match concluded, did everyone kind of get together and watch the VOD? Did leadership go and do that? Or was there any kind of a watch party that happened afterwards?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I think everybody was cheering, everybody was super excited. And then, after that was over, yeah, leadership definitely. Me and Ika reviewed the match, and we each actually wrote down things that definitely needed to be improved upon, and things that could have, things that we can do better. I'm not gonna, go into all of that detail right now,
Yeah.
but we identified some key things that I think we could really do
Okay.
to make sure some of the errors and some of the things that we, perhaps misplayed don't happen again. But yeah, I definitely told the team, and we had some certain timestamps bookmarked so people could kind of figure out, hey, you should have actually done this at this specific time, and make sure you do that for the upcoming match, and so on and so forth. Just the basics of, you know, fixing the little things to make sure they don't happen again, and just building that discipline.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, that obviously has to be one of the most kind of visually impactful areas that, it doesn't just come down to like a he said, she said thing, right? You guys can literally sit down, review your VODs, go over it with everyone, with your teams, and really kind of get in there and fine tune, which I would have to imagine, if you're a player on a team and you're able to save yourself 1, 2, 3 seconds here and there, at any point in a match, or do something that, could have helped out a little bit more, being able to, kind of keep clawing away at making just those tiny, tiny improvements or adjustments just to do a little bit better the next time, a little bit better the next time, a little bit better the next time, all of those things are going to compound and, hopefully work out that much better for everyone in the end. So you guys conclude the match. You do your VOD review. What, and I'm curious on this. And I don't know if I've maybe asked you this before. Have you played Rock? Have you done any like Osiris League stuff over there?
No, no, I
Okay.
actually never played Rock. I think I downloaded the game. I played it for like a week and then I never logged in again.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. So at least with at least with Roots, I'm curious. How do you like the map? How has the experience been so far throughout Road League? As far as the map goes, kind of current features, is there any changes you'd almost would like to see made? Any kind of territory landscape adjustments? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I don't necessarily dislike the map. I think the changes I would look for would be more in regards to the unit type viability as opposed to the map structure. I'm sure, just they'll probably do something with the resource nodes and the tree roots just because it's probably going to end up being meta. So I'm sure they'll do something about that. But as far as like the map itself, not really. I don't have anything against it.
Okay. What do you think about this idea? I've heard some people kind of throwing this around, which is where um, they almost require kind of an equal representation of troop types to be utilized, right? So it's like, out of your 30 players, right, it's like 20% of each troop type would have to be, one of the unique ones. Again, I don't know if that's kind of along the lines of where you might have been going with or even thinking when it comes to kind of troop type representation. Any thoughts there, or no, it doesn't matter? People can use whatever they want.
I mean, I think people should be able to use whatever they want at the end of the day. I don't know how, I guess I'd have to see how that's implemented to see if it's a good idea or a bad idea. Like, I'd definitely say something like that should be tested before it's released because it would really shake a lot of things up. Um, I don't know. At the end of the day, like I said, I think I wish more troop types were viable because if you look at pretty much any of the competitive row teams, it's basically infantry and cavalry, right? There is very few use niche cases for mages or especially archers. Like archers just get run through no matter what. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Okay. I mean, if anything, at least you could argue, I guess, on one side, right, is that in row there's at least more or different focus troop type emphasis compared to kind of maybe out in like in KVK open field, so to speak, where maybe it's a little bit more honed in one area and another. But I guess I can understand that as well on some people, because again, I have heard and have seen people talk about having a little bit more kind of balanced troop representation in row, but at the same time, I know they've been kind of doing it this way where people can kind of decide and choose what they want to use. Now, maybe if they did, for example, a game mode that you could select, right, and people could choose
Hmm.
to participate in that, and that game mode was like, you know, like every troop type represented or something, right? And it was like everyone had to have like a 20% split, and people could actively choose to participate in something like that. Maybe that would be a little bit different, where it's kind of not being forced upon you, or if people are able to maybe test those things out in like a custom mode or a custom game, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, they
But
definitely have to do some testing. I don't know how well received that would be by everybody,
yeah,
to be honest with you. But yeah. I mean, I'm not. I don't ever want to say I'm completely opposed to something without giving it a shot or testing it out first. But I think that would really stir some things up, just because I know a lot of people have probably invested into certain things like Cav or Enf for the Row League
yeah,
itself. So
no, absolutely. So now you guys are going. I'm curious, what's your experience been so far, and just your feedback, your thoughts, going through World League Season One, making it into the playoffs, getting past the first round. What are your thoughts on the inaugural season so far?
yeah, kind of mixed, if I'm being honest with you. I think they could have done a couple of things better. I think I think they did good considering it's the first season they've ever done it. I think I know some people like to trash on the developers and whatnot, but I think they're doing, they're putting their best foot forward. And I think there's some things that like they could definitely fix and improve on, like I said earlier. But I think so far it's been decent. I'm not. I don't think it's been all doom and gloom like some people have said.
Yeah. What do you think about this thing where, and obviously, there's a little bit of that going around right now where, there's kind of, uh, usages of, certain tactics and plays that, have been done that, some people may or may not have been aware of, that obviously has been circulating a little bit where,
Hmm.
you think about, and you were talking about sort of kind of like what might get nerfed, what might become meta. Do you think something like, and it is always an interesting way of looking at it, right? Obviously, with the tree root situation, that becoming as impactful and kind of now becoming more prevalent as it has been. And I'm sure we're probably going to see, like you said and indicated as well, probably a lot more usage going into this next round. But obviously, with something like that, you're even going to end up just like with new heroes coming up. We're going to have new artifacts. We're going to have, again, new features, new usages for those. Who knows what like the next tree root type thing might end up being,
Hmm.
right? Especially as people become more creative. What are your thoughts on, if something does kind of become almost overused, is it just a matter of time for you in your view of we just need to wait until the next kind of new thing comes out that'll get utilized? Or is it no, this is being so overused that it needs to either get nerfed or it needs to get removed?
Yeah, I think so. As far as like the people complaining about the tree roots, I think what most games call it is a clever use of game mechanics,
Yeah.
because the game mechanic exists. You're not inherently doing something like making yourself invincible through a glitch or something like that, right? So I think it's perfectly legal to use it. Let's get that, out of the way first, because I know a lot of people have said, "Oh no, that's cheating, this, that, and the other." I don't think it's cheating at all. I think, the artifact has a particular use. And if you're smart enough to figure that out to get yourself, a win or a better position, good for you. As far as like the artifact itself, I think long term they probably do need to get rid of it or fix it, because if you're using it against somebody who isn't, you're just going to win and they're going to lose, because you're going to get, you know, the 2 million troops worth of garrison and buildings A, B, C, and D, and then you could even use it to essentially refill the buildings too. I don't know if you know that, but there is an emphasis on that too. It's like, hey, even if they're blocking your entrance, you can use this artifact at a particular spot to literally just jump back into the building and refill it from halfway across the map. So their field control kind of becomes irrelevant at that point, right? And I think we saw some of that with the MFD versus EIS match. So I think with the artifact having as much of an impact as it does, while I do think it is legal and it is a clever use of game mechanics, like I said earlier, I think it's going to be so meta defining that they're going to have to either hard code it to where it literally always takes you to the middle, or they just straight up say you can't use this artifact anymore. That's my thought process on it, at least.
Okay. Interesting. I guess another approach is they could always limit the amount of players that could use a given artifact as well. That might potentially help, but not to say that it would necessarily combat some of the kind of range options in,
Yeah,
in,
I
in
think I
usages.
think what ends up, yeah, being, I mean, I think even if they do that, the meta then just becomes you take two Spring Wardens flyers, have them blink into the middle to prevent you from teleporting to those particular nodes, and then you
Mm,
just use your two guys to go to the right and left halls again. So I think it's either you completely get rid of it, or you hard code it to take you to one specific area instead.
yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it is valid criticism when it comes to how are those things going to get addressed, and if they end up having just massive overusage on them, and it's something where because I think you brought up such a good point there on you don't want the core part of the roots gameplay to be nullified where you're fighting out in the open field, troops are having to kind of move around, you need to see the micro play being utilized. These are things that obviously if you are able, like you said, to replenish via a short range TP,
mhm.
kind of eliminates it, kind of almost similar to the what is it, the Last Stand Garrison thing for the Bastion. I'm forgetting the name now. But kind of similar in a sense, right, with the invincibility, right, that you were able to get within the 30 seconds before, and being able to basically have kind of like the free replenishment going into the Bastion. Obviously, it's different, but
Hmm.
it feels like the concept is somewhat similar there. Obviously, one just applies more to the open field there in the KVK and is more rally focused, rally garrison focused, versus this, which is kind of more particular to row in that case. But
Yeah,
I
yeah. I mean,
understand that, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I was gonna say too. It's like, is the developer's vision of Roots of War really just people teleporting and filling with ancient tree roots? I don't
Exactly.
think that's the case. I don't think that's what they really envisioned this game mode to be. Is, hey, lock these two buildings down first, and just keep teleporting with a gathering artifact, and you'll win every time.
Yeah.
I think that like,
Yeah. No, touche. I think that's spot on. And I think it also speaks to the fact that some artifacts might be more conducive to allowing Roots of War to flourish in its gameplay, whereas some other artifacts might be more hindering, right? Just depending on their uses. So yeah, no, again, I very much agree there with that thought process. So going into your next week, I know we kind of alluded to this a little bit, but you guys are going up against GG in your next week.
mhm.
Now we know some things are obviously going on there with GG because we did report on this already with them pretty much disbanding, and I think they're at like 3 or 4 billion power now, or something super low. There in the kingdom, and it feels like you guys kind of got this blessing in disguise of what feels like it's going to be a bye week for you, which
Yeah,
means
yeah.
you guys kind of now have this free walk into quarterfinals. Um, for your group, obviously for the most part, if everything kind of plays out the way it looks like. But again, what's the plan there as far as, again, given that that may happen, what's the approach going to be going into that match?
Yeah, I've told my team that we're going to continue to hold practices as if there is. I understand there's probably only one. I think if you look, there's one person registered on the GG side. What they do, I told my team doesn't concern us, whether it's one person or a full 30 with 15 subs, doesn't matter. I said, we're going to host the practices on the weekend. You guys are going to get in there, you're going to execute, you're going to take it seriously, and you're going to do it for the full 60 minutes that it's there. So it's business as usual. I told my team that we're not just going to take a bye week and get sloppy. We're going to go in there. We're going to maintain that discipline that we would normally would have, and we're going to execute, and then we're going to prepare for the following weeks, because I don't want to breed that mentality about we don't have to show up or do anything. It's no, you go in there, you do what you got to do, and then you go on to the next one.
No, absolutely. I very, very much agree there on that, where it's, worst case, even if you're not going to get an authentic match, it's at least another opportunity just to practice openings, to practice timings, to practice transitions, whatever it might be. It is still an extra day of practice, which obviously can help and at least keep you as sharp as possible for whatever the next matchup might be. And, obviously, if you guys do end up going forward, which it seems like it will, because when I was clicking on their name, I could see they do only have one person registered. So again, it looks like, unless something drastically changes, right, that's most likely how it's going to end up, which means that once you guys get to quarterfinals, it's going to be either going up against Illuminati, or BP, or
Hmm.
OBP. Any thoughts on, and again, this is one of those things where, because you guys have some extra time, it's almost like, man, we could watch the II match against ASI or the OPB match against SC97, even though for the most part, right, they were pretty much blowouts in
Hmm.
both. Um, again, I don't know if you're familiar with either of the teams. Has there been any consideration or look into either of them up until this point, or do you feel like, man, we'll do that once we see who wins?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at some of their game reviews. I think that this round of reviewing who's going to win and who's going to face us in this upcoming match is going to be probably the most important one. Like I said, if you look, I think we were probably the only team in the Epic Conference using the tree roots.
Mm.
I don't think any of these guys were familiar with it, but like I said, with MFD getting their huge upset, the cat's kind of out of the bag. So we're gonna have to see how a lot of these guys adapt their strategies. And because I mean, beforehand, I think we could have beaten pretty much every single one of these teams that weren't using it. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
how powerful it was. But I think this is going to be a good time to kind of see, what their strategies are with kind of the new meta that's formed with a lot of these artifacts and
Yeah.
see how they play. And then we'll sit down, myself and probably Ika will sit down and review it and see what the best strategy is for beating these guys and get into the finals is going to be.
Okay. And that leads me into maybe one of my last questions here for you. How far does FA believe uh, and is aiming for right now? Again, you threw the word finals out there. Is this something where you guys feel like maybe as much as any other team on either side of the bracket that listen, we can make it to the finals. We have the potential to win this whole thing. Where is your guys' confidence and belief right now?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you have to basically go in there. That's my mindset. If you're going to play, you're going to play to win right now. That's kind of what I told my team. I think we can definitely make it there. Or, then it's unpredictable, right? We could get beaten by I or OPB, and that's just how it works. But at the end of the day, like I told my team, hey, you guys got to believe that you can make it to the finals. I think beating BTR, who was likely seen as the favorite, for the epic bracket was a huge morale boost. So, I think that's good. We have that on our side, but it's also just telling the guys, you guys, look, you pulled this off. There's a lot of hard matches to come and we can definitely win this. But, it's also you got to also, I feel like, keep them a little bit humble and be like, hey, these other teams are just as good. And, with all of the stuff that's circulating, they're very likely going to adapt. So now it's just going to be a matter of how do we overcome that. But yeah, man, I think at the end of the day, you have to want to win, the championships. Otherwise, it's like, what are you fighting for? you know?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think being able to kind of have, which is funny on because when I was talking to Abda on the MFG side, he's just like, man, as long as we make a top four skin, like that's it, we're good, GG, And it's like, but I imagine, in their case, they're probably thinking, because for them in their group, right? I mean, they're basically the underdog now for every matchup,
hmm
right? Obviously, with the
hmm
exception of their next one against Sleepy. So,
hmm
but if they make it past quarters, their semis is going to be an underdog matchup. Their finals will definitely be an underdog matchup, right? In the event that Echo makes it there and they were to go all the way there, which would be freaking phenomenal, I think, for their team to do. But basically, 3 out of their 4 matches in the playoffs are David versus Goliath matchups against them.
hmm hmm
And so obviously it is different, at least in that regard. But so I kind of see where he's going from that. I mean, them making into top 4, like it was almost like they had to beat EIS just to be able to have what they probably felt like was a 50-50 shot going into their quarterfinal matchup to then make it into semis for a top 4 skin, right? Just to have that opportunity to get there. It was like if this didn't happen, it was like just no way at all, like just no hope, so to speak, or at least the odds would have been very much not in their favor.
Yeah, definitely. And I do wish them all the best. I kind of like cheering for the underdog too. So we'll see. We'll see. I'll probably be putting some chips on them to win their next match, but I'd definitely be curious to see what it's looking like before the finals, maybe the semi or quarterfinals. The legendary bracket looks like it's getting really spicy, and I don't think, and it's like I said earlier, man, I don't like, not even just MFD. I don't think people should count out alliances like OMG or even BTX. Like I think BTX will give Echo a really good challenge if they plan things accordingly.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. I'm sure there is going to be quite a few more upsets to some of these big names.
Yeah. And listen, man, I'm always down for close matchups, and I think anytime it gets down to a nail biter, which it very much felt like that was what the MFDEIS one was basically just that. I mean, literally almost for the entirety of it. So those are definitely the most exciting. Anyways, to close things out, any shout outs, any shots you'd like to fire, any declarations, last thoughts.
No, I'm good, man. Just wishing everybody who's got their matches coming up the best of luck. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, Lev, man, thank you so much for taking some time and sitting down, man. Obviously, best of luck to you guys going into your upcoming match against GG, and even if it ends up just being for the most part a bye, obviously we'll be looking out and seeing how you guys play out and who you're going to face in quarters. But definitely the best to you guys on the remainder of the Roots of War League, man. And if you guys continue to make it, hopefully I'll be able to see you back here again.
Yeah, appreciate it, BN. Thanks, man. Well, have a good one.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
Bye.